Well, husbands, wives, brothers, sisters, uncles, aunts and grandparents. Today, on Remembrance Day, we pay tribute and honour all those who have served in wars past and present. 100-year-old Betty Cornford and 32-year-old Julie Edge both answered the call to service for our nation, but in two very different wars in very different times. Reporter Justine Conway met these inspiring diggers.
When Betty Cornford tells you about her life, she remembers it like it was yesterday.
Many of us had never been out of Australia, including myself.
The year is 1940. Australia is entrenched in the Second World War, and the 26-year-old newly qualified nurse from Geelong is called to serve.
The wards were terribly full, and at first we working very hard, and we had very little time off when we first got there, and you would work long hours, and in the heat we were not particularly used to.
She travelled the world, to Jerusalem, New Guinea. That's where she met her husband, Doug.
He was very sick, so he was in there quite long. So we met there, and he was interested in me. I think you're looking for someone when you're 30, someone who will look after you and want to make a home, and that was what he wanted. And of course he was a very nice man.
And you nursed him back to health?
If you like to put it that way.
Today, Betty will think of her dear late husband, the men and women she met during her time at war. Like many others who've served this country, she is proud. Remembrance Day honours them all.
My most vivid memory would have to be September 11, 2001. That day, I remember watching what happened on television and realising that there was something massive that needed to be done.
Julie Edge wears medals from a modern-day conflict. In 2007, she was deployed to Iraq and later Afghanistan.
Joining the Army, I say to anyone and everyone, is hands down the best thing that I've ever done in my life. And every single person who wears that uniform is your family, and it becomes the biggest and best Australian team of people working for the same outcome.
Like Betty, she will be wearing her poppy with pride. She wants all Australians to do the same.
People come back affected by what they do and see over there in all different ways, and the symbolism of the poppy brings us all together and helps to support them and their families. We couldn't do what we do without the families and without the support of our friends.
Such impressive women. And keeping with that theme, I'm joined now by Squadron Leader Melinda Sporer, who served for the Royal Australian Air Force in the Second Gulf War and Afghanistan operations. Good morning to you, Melinda.
Hi, Lisa.
Things have come a long way in the last 100 years, you'd have to say. For a long time it was considered that war and theatres of war were just not an appropriate place for women.
That's really interesting. You know, I've seen women working on the front line back even in World War I, those amazing nurses. So women have been working through all the armed conflicts that Australia have been involved in. They've also been a massive support for their families back home when the men were at war. And I've been here for 17 years now, and I never saw it, even 17 years ago, as a place that females didn't belong. Since I've been in, I've always been treated well by the men. It's like one big family. So I've never felt that way. I do think it's great for women.
So 17 years with the RAAF. Tell us about your role.
I've had varied roles over those years. I'm a personnel capability officer, which is in civilian speak human resource management. So I've had
Thank you for human speak and normal speak.
I've had a variety of roles. So I've worked with the Orion aircraft at Edinburgh and got to go overseas on exercises and obviously operations with them. I'm currently working in diversity and inclusion policy here in Canberra. So the Air Force and the ADF as a whole is very strongly committed to having a diverse workforce, and we certainly want to attract and retain more women, Indigenous and LGBTI people.
Okay, you're going to have to translate that one, LGBTI.
Lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender and intersex.
Wow, I didn't know there was an acronym for that, but there
Yes.
is. So that's great to know that everybody is welcome.
Definitely. We're strongly committed to retaining as many of those sorts of people, making them feel included in the workplace, because Air Force and the ADF recognises that the more diverse we are, the more the skills, different experiences we can bring to the table, which really helps us operationally.
Sure. So today is a day of remembrance. What does it mean to you?
On Remembrance Day, I reflect back through all of the different wars that Australia has been involved in. I think of how difficult it must have been in World War I, working in those trenches, to be the families back home, not getting a lot of communications. I think about people who have died recently in wars because they're no longer just faceless people to me. I also think about the people who are over there serving now, some of which I know, and think about their families. But most of all, I guess I look to the future and hope that there'll be no one else to remember.
Yeah, indeed. The ripple effect from these wars, we know, is enormous, and this is such an extraordinary building, and it's wonderful that so many people do come and visit and see it as a place of reflection. Melinda, thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you, Lisa.
And back to you in the studio, Carl.
Continuing that theme, Lisa, we've been asking you to share your stories of relatives who fought on the front line. And this has come in from Vicky this morning. Signed up at the tender age of 16 years. 16 years. My beautiful grandfather, William Henry Bryant, 4th Battalion, Australian Imperial Force. Amazing.
Incredible. Fiona sent this photo in. My grandfather, service number 376, served World War I in France. They're all heroes, lest we forget.
From Jane, this is my grandfather, William McLean. He fought in Darwin during World War II. He passed away in January. And today would have been his 97th birthday.
That there is an Aussie face, isn't it? Eh? And this from Diane, my Uncle Charles Davey on the left and my father George Davey on the right. That was World War II. So thank you for sending in those pictures. And we'll get to some more of those a little bit later.
Keep them coming. It's wonderful to remember on this day.